Hello, my name is Jason Harlow. I've been in art in video games for the last 15 years. Now I'm doing indie dev, like all kinds of things. Art, programming, designing. But most of my past in education is in art, so I want to talk to you about art. And one of the core, the most important things you could know about art is composition. Because you're always presenting your art to other people. Even if you're not making art, if you're not an artist, you're probably taking pictures of things, and composition matters there too. So we're going to take a brief few minutes and talk about composition. This woman and her setting in different boxes were composed by a friend of mine, Chris Schenk. You can see in the upper right there, he made a bunch of squares and placed his drawing in there to show you what bad composition is. Bad, horrible, better, acceptable but not great. And then he made some rectangular boxes and put his drawing in there. And those are a little bit better. We're going to talk about why those are bad in the upper right hand corner and why those are good in the lower left area. First off, their image format matters. And it matters because of this weird thing called the golden ratio, the golden rectangle. It's this weird spiral thing, but it sort of makes a rectangular shape that has some rhythm and flow to it that is very pleasing to the eye. A square is not great. I don't know why Instagram makes everything a square, but now people are really used to squares and making squares visually appealing. But it's not the best format for presenting your work. A better format is this 1.618. I think that's a number that Da Vinci came up with because it's super pleasing to humans for some reason. So if you look at your TV screens, they've slowly over time morphed from this 4 to 3 ratio or 5 to 4 ratio. They've morphed into more of a 16 to 10 or 16 to 9. And I believe that's because they're trying to become a more visually appealing thing to look at because of this golden ratio. Right now it just looks like a swirl and you're like, big deal, this doesn't make sense to me. Okay, a rectangle is better than a square. Good, that's all you should get from that. A rectangle is better than a square. Whoa, go back. All right. But basically to make this golden rectangle, you start off with a square. And then you find the middle of the square and you draw a line to one of the corners. And then you've got like a radius for a circle. And you draw an arc of that radius until it reaches the bottom of your square. And then that's the far side of your rectangle. And you draw that up and you make this rectangle. And that's your golden rectangle. So what they did to make that swirl, started with a squirrel, extended it over to make a rectangle, and then they divided that into like a square and like another square and then connected it all together to make this tasty swirl. You'll see that later. So once you extend your square into this golden rectangle and you divide it up into different shapes, you can start to see where putting a focal point for your image will make your image just a little bit more appealing to people, to humans. We haven't really done any research on how appealing these images are to other species, cats, dogs, just humans. So you can see they start to do this. You can go with the swirl here, or you can just divide it into. There's a rhyme and a reason to those triangles on the left. You see they've divided it up, and they're right angles, but like they match up with where the swirl happens. It's very difficult to explain back here when the stuff is up there. Just trust me on this. So, all right. But I'm tired of talking about that, so I knew that I would want to move away from that. So next slide is completely disjointed, unrelated. When you're composing an image, you're going to throw some things in there, and most of the time, you don't want to have a flat image. You want to try and fake some depths in your image. And there are different ways that you can achieve that. One is, I've got my primitive shapes there, just using overlap. And then to the right, you see there's a large people and small people. But even without those lines and the woods in the background, you get a sense that this large person is closer to you and that small person is farther away. And it's a little disturbing to see that tiny person next to that large man, because it just messes with what your brain knows is the depth of the world, right?
I assume it's exactly the same person as that.
It is, yes. But so then we go around in a clockwise manner here, and you see the next thing to create depth is detail. So these are flat images, but given the detail that some things are blurry, some things are crisp, some things are high contrast, some things are low contrast, like the detail involved in those images creates some depth to them. They don't feel flat, they feel a little deeper. And the last thing that you can do is fade things out. So in those two, those ink drawings or pencil or charcoal or something, it doesn't really matter. You can see that the things in the foreground are high detail, strong contrast, and then as you move away farther away from the viewer, we fade them out. And it feels like something that occurs in our planet. The atmosphere starts to get in the way, and you start feeling, so that feels like a naturally good thing to humans, and you understand depth. Focus, I think, who knows why I threw that in there. Maybe some of the images, the drawings on the right have focus in a different way through contrast and color and line work. There's edge direction, sharpness. Somebody wrote it there next to the... I didn't really want to talk about perspective a lot, so I took out all the slides about perspective. But I left in this one about the horizon line, because the horizon line can help you create a pleasing image. Because what you do with the horizon line is you tell the viewer where they are. First, let's go over these images on the right, and then I'll talk about all the text on the left. In the top two images, there's an artist, and they're drawing this scene, right? And they're just standing on the ground somewhere, and they're overlooking this lake, and the horizon line is at their eye level. That's basically the rule. Where the horizon line, that's your eye level. And if you want to see more of the lake, you have to raise the viewer's eye level, or the horizon, up. You can see that in action in the middle three illustrations. That's the same building and the same three trees, but the horizon line is low, middle, and high, and it makes you feel like you're on the ground, and then in the middle, like maybe you're a little taller, or you're like on the first floor or something, and then like in the third image, you feel like you're up on the top floor, or you're on the roof of the building. So you really, you compose the image in these ways to make the viewer feel something, feel their place in the world. And then the last two images, this is the same 3D model, but we've changed the horizon line so that you're looking up at this creature, and he looks ominous and foreboding, and you're afraid of him. Or you're looking down at him, and he looks like he's cowering, and he's afraid of you. Or she, we're not sure. So you don't really see the horizon line in these images, but how can I escape? I want to use the mouse so you can see here. So that yeah, well, I don't want to talk about the vanishing point because we'll talk about perspective then, and I'm just dropping perspective. So no. So down here, the horizon line is in this image. The horizon line is down here. You are very small and short. In this image, the horizon line is off the. It's like way up here somewhere, and you're looking down at this tiny thing at your feet. Okay. Let's start. Please work. Yay. All right, so the horizon line, let me talk about lines for a second. Lines are all lies. Lines are a 2D thing. They exist when you draw them on paper, but they don't exist in our world because we live in a 3D world. So lines are really when two differing things meet. It could be a light and a dark thing. It could be a brown and an orange thing. It's two things that meet, and then our brain sort of simplifies them and says, oh, there's a line there. But it doesn't exist as a line. It's not real. You're making up lines. Lines are lies. But you can use lines like the horizon line or where two things meet to help you tell a story. Perhaps we can insert your vanishing point here. If you have a vanishing point, your building angles are going to point at that vanishing point. Now, those lines aren't real, but they help you understand your place in the world. Point of view, this is accepted reality and implications. You're telling a story, there are cultural assumptions. Yeah, so different cultures use the horizon line in different ways and perspective to communicate things differently. It's like the understood cultural underground, like what we all understand as the norm, but it differs from culture to culture, so be aware of that. I don't have any good examples. What am I saying here? Landscape is grand, portraits still got down. So, yeah, never mind. Let's go. If you're drawing characters, you need to think about the lines involved in that character. So you look at this character on the left, and she looks pretty cool. You're like, all right, yeah. But if you take a closer look, you realize that the horizon line, or where the artist is telling you that your eye level is the same for the whole character. I'm looking at your eyes. No, I'm looking at your neck. No, I'm looking at your chest, your waist, and your knees, and your ankles. Like, I'm looking at everything. The implication is this character is very far away from you, and you can see those things in that equal way. If the character were closer to you, you would see them with more perspective. The lines would be more like the characters on the right. Those feel much more realistic because the lines force them to not be so static. So we've moved pretty far away from composition, but now we're going to go back to it and talk about lines in our compositions and how you see them in buildings and characters and how they make an image feel good. So one thing that people talk about is the rule of thirds. You don't really get a sense of the rule of thirds from this image because it's just 4 dots on this in a box. But if you were to divide this box into thirds, where those intersecting lines are is where those red dots are. So if you were to take a photo of this, looks like England, London on the Thames somewhere, right? Your picture is going to look pretty cool if you have the general building height at 1/3 and then you have 2/3 sky. Contrasting, if you just put the buildings right in the middle of the picture, it's not going to look quite as good as this. So this is how you use the third lines, the rule of thirds, to make your images look a little better. Maybe you want to focus on the water. Then you put your buildings, the line of those buildings up to where that 2/3 is. We talk about that a little more here. So they took some pictures and then they divided them into thirds, and then they illustrated where those points are, where the lines meet, and where the focal, the interest is, the focal point. Yeah. So they took this picture of this woman on this grassy field with a little stream or something, but they sort of put her in that lower third corner. That just makes it feel a little more balanced. In the middle picture, there's this family over here, and there's a focal point in the lower right, but then there's this like building in the upper left-hand side. So like that makes these two focal points like kind of balance the image out. Interestingly, there's also some perspective lines going away at that fence or wall that they're leaning against. And then in the last image, there's this face, but they've positioned her eyes like pretty close to those focal points in the top third, and then like her mouth sort of falls right on that bottom third line. So that just makes a pretty interesting portrait. Some things that you want to think about when you're drawing things and trying to compose an image. If you make things barely touch each other, it's like, oh, this thing is cool, I don't want to have anything in front of it. So, and this thing is cool, I don't want to have anything in front of that. I'll have them like sort of just be close. If they're just touching or they're really close to each other, that'll make your image feel really anxious. For some reason, humans don't like that. It doesn't feel good. If you make your, in the middle image here, if you make your objects not touch at all, then it makes everything in there feel pretty lonely. It just feels a little depressing. So what you want to do is try to have things overlap a little, like they're kind of talking to each other. They're working together to make this composition look good. And then you need to start paying attention to tangents, like how those lines that are lies are working in your image. So you have some parallel lines of the window frame with the top and the bottom and the floor, but there's also like this little perspective in the room in the corner that you can see in the table, right? You got this round rug that sort of feels alone and it's the only round thing, but then you notice like, oh, the lamp is a little bit round. There's some round trees in that image. You got to make things feel like they belong to something else in the image. 1 point or 2 points perspective? No, we're not talking about perspective. Another thing you can do to check how your composition is turn that picture around. Turn it upside down, turn it on its side. Look at it from the other side if you can. And then your composition will stand out to you if it's good or bad, but if you're drawing something crappy and the face is wrong or the eyes are askew or something, then it'll really stand out to you. So do that. It works with your photos as well, not just your drawings. So, now it's quiz time. You see here I have a little example of this girl, and she's you take a picture of a kid and you put their face right in the center. And that's not bad, but if you just offset it a little bit, then you have her eyes in the focal point of the upper left-hand corner, and that'll feel a lot better. And what else you get is like the slope of her arm and the slope of the chair, and they feel like they're working together. Suddenly there's like these things pointing to her head. Before, you don't really notice that. It's not really working. Also, she moved. Then this guy on the right, this image on the top is not terrible, but we're going to call it bad because below it is a much more interesting composition where he's off center and these lines like are really, they like zoom from really close to you into him, pointing at him, and they're out of focus and then they can become focused. So we're using focus and all of these things to make this image a lot more interesting. And then see here, they took a picture and you're like, why is this interesting? And somebody drew that swirly thing from the golden rectangle to make it seem like this was my intent all along. And I don't know if you really believe that or not, This is something that I like to call artistic BSing. When you flex your abs, you're artistic BSing. How good are you at this artistic BSing? You have to practice flexing your abs in order to get good at it. So, now we will quiz you. What do you think? Is this good or bad composition, and why?
It's good. It's got depth.
Mm-hmm. All right, participation is low. I'm going to say this is good, but I'm going to say it's good because we have some perspective lines leading us down this path towards these two people. And so, and it's not quite in the lower third, but this, the division. I can actually point at things. I didn't realize this. If you divide this in thirds, right, you have a third here and a third here. So they're kind of at the third, but they're a little too far over this way. It's all right. It's close enough that it works. You got these lines pointing at them. There's a high contrast right around them. They're dark, and there's all this white around them. All of these tree branches are leaning in here. That's good. They're pointing right at them. Great picture. Good composition. How about this? Is this good composition or bad composition? It's pretty bad. There's a number of bad things going on here. You got the main character, because if you put a human in the shot, then the human is going to identify with the human in the picture, in your drawing, in your whatever, right? This is looking off screen, and all we can think is, what's going on over there, not in this image? They have this very strong line, there we go, right in the middle of the picture. It's not on any of the thirds. This is sort of working. This pulls on the third, but that's the only thing. They got some there's an interesting line here at an angle. Angles are good. Pretty bad picture. Bad composition.
I think that picture of the snow scene, as a photographer, I would say you could take that in any composition from that position and it probably look great. Just based on the scene.
Probably.
Unless you didn't have those people in this picture, I don't think it would sell it.
Right? It might be a little boring if there was no.
You could probably move those people anywhere just because of where you are, or the people. I think it would still work.
It might.
No matter where you move to. It's a great situation. Sometimes it's just being in the right spot.
Sometimes, right? I'm on the fence on this one. What do you guys think?
The sky and the water.
Yeah, don't let the HDR fool you, because I'm not really sure. I mean, just because it's got some good things going on, but I'm like, they have this horizon line that's not quite at the top third. Is it close enough you could flex your abs and say, yeah, it's the top third? Sure, maybe. They got this point of interest here. They have all these lines pointing to it, right? There's something over here, like even the water here is swooping up towards this. But is it on the intersection of the thirds? I don't know. It's close enough, I guess you could say. Maybe these what are those?
Balloons.
Buoys or balloons? Sure. Okay. Maybe they're at the focal point of the thirds. So that's good. We feel like we're leaning towards good composition. How about this? Yeah, I'd say that. I feel like that line's more on the third. And this path is going along the third, like right up there, and then they've got this. It's a little low, but we got the tree line here pointing down towards it. Feels good to me. I would say this is not great composition. Right? There are no people. How about this composition? Look at the diagonals there. Isn't that awesome? We got 2, maybe 3 focal points. They're kind of all over the place. This is pretty terrible. Right?
That's a situation where you're using your depth of field, if they had used the camera to focus on just the background
could probably make this work better, changing your focus. Like they have a different, there's...
There's, there, you see that? Where the focus is on the front and the back is all blurry.
Yeah.
I like this.
It's great.
It's an interesting photo, right? You feel like you could look all over and keep looking at it, and you keep coming back to these spheres and then back into the space and then back out. Lots of lines going on that aren't really lines.
It's also the Dutch.
So that was my really quick talk about composition, but there are other people who explain things a lot better than me, and I can't click on things. That wasn't me. I don't know what that was. Tell us about that, John.
That's for example.
So there are a couple links here. If you go to luli.deviantart, like one of the images shows up. Paste and go. This is a series of slides that somebody put together. Yes. They talk about things. We're just going to look at things real quick here, and they show you stuff and draw on things and point out like good and bad, and talk about like what the focus of your image is, and action lines and things like this. Shapes. All right. This is a really good explanation of composition and how you can use a number of other things rather than just the rule of thirds and stuff. Where's my thing? And then this is another good one. You can just copy. We'll just look at it briefly and not talk about it. The secrets to composition. Load faster. Thank you. Oh. Yeah, wait, there we go. So the secret to composition, and like you just scroll down and read all of the stuff they've got to talk about. You're talking about lines and saturation and contrast and like fading out your background to make a more interesting composition and things like this. If you put text into an image, then the humans are going to read that first. So be careful. Stuff like that. So it's here, they've got this thing, right? And these lines here and these lines, and it's all like working towards making a good composition. If you look up composition on Wikipedia, this is the image you'll see, this thing here. So somebody took a picture out in the desert of this rock, and it's not a bad image, but it's very centrally located. I think like if you want something, putting something in the center of your image isn't bad, but it almost has this iconic or religious connotation to it. Like you must pay attention to this person or this thing. Like it's so important, and that's not usually the case. So if you just offset your camera just a little bit, then suddenly this is on the third, and like you point up a little bit more and this is on thirds now, and it just feels like a lot more pleasant to look at. Here's a very constructed image forcing this swirl to work for it. They're using perspective lines here. So, and they talk about a whole bunch of other things. So you should really check out these other two files and learn about good composition. Ta-da, I'm done.